Hello guys, and welcome to our lesson on passive voice. Today we are going to explore the advanced forms. Friendly reminder about the difference between active and passive voice. The example that we're going to explore today is this one about a woman who is asking her husband to do more chores around the house. The man responds, "Can we change the subject?" Of course. In this case, we will say more chores around the house need to be done by you. What we did in here was what the man asked us exactly, was changing the subject, but we also did a typical change between active and passive voice. If you notice, we are not talking anymore about the man, but we are talking about the chores. But that's not exactly the only thing that changed. So we are going to explore the sentence a little bit more in detail. Here we have the sentence, you need to do more chores at home. It has a subject, a verb that is accompanied by a semi-modal, need to, but the main verb happens to be do. And then we have a complement, more chores at home. That is the object of the sentence, and that is the one that we want to focus on. So, what happens with the subject? The subject goes till the end of the sentence because now it's not going to be that relevant. Then we are going to move the object of the sentence till the beginning of the sentence. Now it is going to be the new subject. And then a big transformation that happens here, and it's always that we have to keep in mind not just for this specific explanation, but for the whole presentation today, it's going to be that we always use verb to be in passive voice. Here, we are going to maintain the semi-modal, yes, and there is where we are going to use the verb to be. So, more chores at home need to be done. In this case, the verb do, that was the main verb, it's written in past participle. And then, we need a particle by in order to indicate who's the doer of the action. But remember that that's not necessarily important in passive voice. That's information that could be taken out from the sentence most of the times without affecting the meaning of the sentence. Another example, the police finally caught the thief last week. In this example, we have the thief as the object, which is going to be the new subject of the sentence. And then we use the verb to be in the same tense that the original and main verb was in the sentence, past simple. And then we use the verb to be, the main verb in past participle, caught, which happens to be, coincidentally, the same form as the past simple. Remember, the doer is optional, and the complement remains in the same place. Now let's focus again on this sentence. The thief was finally caught last week. In this sentence, we have a typical formal passive voice form that is normally found in news heading, for example. We can be a little bit more informal if we change the verb to be by the verb get. So instead of saying the thief was caught, we can say the thief got caught. Using got in passive voice makes the sentence a lot more informal. Let's check how to use get in passive voice. We normally have the verb get in the same tense as we would use the verb to be. For example, can you believe it? I got fined for parking here. This sentence is informal, but also something that you need to notice is that if I wanted to use regular passive voice, I would say, I was fined for parking here. So in this case, I had the verb to be in past simple, so I also use the verb got in past simple. Good news, I might get hired at the local library. Again, the use of get gives informality of the sentence. But the sentence could be more formal and be written in typical passive voice form if we use verb to be instead of get. Now, something to keep in mind is that these two verbs, find and hard, had two things in common, or well, just one in this case. We are going to focus on them as action verbs. What happened here? We normally use the get in passive voice if we are using action verbs. Some of the most typical action verbs that are used with get in passive voice are accept, catch, choose, elect, fire, and so on. We use the be passive voice in forms where the state verbs are presented. For example, the mayor was disliked by everyone. We have here the verb dislike, which happens to be a state verb. In this case, we don't normally say the mayor got disliked because dislike is a state verb, so we are not going to see this very often. Henry was needed at home. Need, a state verb. So it's not really used to do got needed. Some of the most typical state verbs that we use in English are agree, remember, matter, mind, recognize, own, appear, have, supposition, taste, and smell. Now let's talk about the use of get in causative forms. Remember that causative is another example of passive voice. So let's have a reminder about the causative. The have causative, or just known as causative, it's a type of language expression that we use in English in order to talk about things that we mention that are done by someone else different to us. For example, if you are talking about your nails, you don't normally do your nails on your own, normally. So in this case, we can say that you can have your nails done. Or like in the example, I am having my nails done. This is a typical example of causative in English. Now, we can use the get in causative again to be more informal. So you can say, I am getting my nails done. That sounds more informal. We got our windows cleaned. The typical form of causative is we had our windows cleaned. But in order to be more informal, you just need to change the have for the got. I will get my house painted. You can use that in any tense. As you can see here, the original sentence would be, I will have my house painted. But you can be more informal in this causative by using get. Remember that the passive voice is also something that we can find after some situations in which ing forms are needed. Now, let's think about this. Remember that when we start a sentence, we normally use an ing form. If that verb that you are using at the beginning of the sentence is in passive voice, what you are going to do is transform the verb to be into an ing form. For example, being admitted to the college changed my life. Passive voice, being admitted. What I did here was affecting the verb to be with the ing form just because this verb at the beginning of the sentence, as a typical rule, must be in ing. Now, another example of ing forms is that we know is that after prepositions, we normally have to have a verb in ing. So, for example, do you worry about being criticized by your boss? This verb after about has to be affected and used or written in passive voice, in ing form. But it also happens to be in passive voice. So what you do is transforming the verb to be, not the main verb, the verb to be. The main verb is always going to be in past participle. After verbs commonly followed by ing forms. For example, I miss being taken care of by my family. In this case, we have a verb miss, which normally has to be followed by a verb in ing. But if that verb is in passive voice as well, what we do is writing the verb to be with ing form. These are some of typical examples of verbs that are followed by ing forms. And finally, we have the passive voice with infinitives. Again, think about the rules for infinitives. Let's think about these three here. After adjectives. We know that after an adjective, we normally have a verb. That verb has to be in an infinitive. She was the most interested candidate to be interviewed. To give reasons. Why are you waiting here? Oh, I am waiting to be connected. After verbs, commonly followed by infinitives. As with the ing forms, we also have verbs that are normally followed by infinitives, like hope. I hope to be sent to the conference. If the verb that is following hope is also in passive voice, we need to transform the be and put it in infinitive. These are some of the most typical verbs followed by infinitives. Ready for some practice? This is the end of the lesson. Please save your work and have it ready to be shared in our next face-to-face session. Bye-bye.